The low buzz of my porch light flickered above me as I unfolded the birthday card my own daughter had taped to the door. Still, I kept my fingertips calm on the paper, refusing to let a father's heartbreak turn into panic. As the buzzing grew louder, it felt like it was repeating every cruel word she'd ever used to cut me down. While I stood there, that hum steadied the truth I'd avoided about our broken blood tie. The same faint vibration told me this wasn't a daughter losing her way. It was a daughter choosing it. That's when I decided, I can love her from afar, but I will no longer bleed for her up close. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. Henry Collins had never asked for much from life, not even on his birthday. At 68, the world had grown quieter around him, his late wife's laugh no longer echoing through the Ohio house, the family photos slowly yellowing on the mantel, the winters colder than they used to be. But tonight, he told himself, would be simple, warm, maybe even healing. Just dinner with his two children, nothing fancy. A roast in the oven, soft music humming through the kitchen, and the faint hope that the three of them could feel like a family again, even if only for a couple of hours. He moved slowly but carefully, adjusting the placemats on the table, polishing the silverware like it mattered. It was his birthday. A man should at least pretend the day means something. When the doorbell finally rang, the quiet house seemed to breathe in. Henry wiped his hands on a dish towel, steadied his shoulders, and opened the door. Mark stood there with a wide grin, arms already spread. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, pulling Henry into a warm, grounding hug. Mark always hugged like he meant it, steady, solid, the kind of son who showed up not out of duty but love. Henry felt a knot in his chest loosen just from his presence. They were laughing about an old memory, Henry burning a Thanksgiving turkey back in '99, when the front door swung open without a knock. Lily walked in with the sharp energy of someone who didn't want to be anywhere near the place she just entered. Her coat hung half off her shoulder, her hair was pulled back in a careless knot, and her eyes never rose from the glowing phone in her hand. "You're late," Mark said gently, trying not to sound accusatory. Lily shrugged, thumbs still tapping. "Traffic," she muttered, though Henry knew she lived 10 minutes away. She didn't hug him, didn't look at him, didn't even offer a simple happy birthday. Instead, she reached into her purse with the same indifference someone might use to toss spare change into a donation jar. She pulled out a small envelope, no decoration, no name, and flicked it across the table toward him without lifting her eyes. "There," she said, "your gift." The envelope slid to a stop near Henry's hands. Something in the way it landed felt wrong, too careless, too cold. But he forced a smile anyway, the kind parents master when they're trying to hold their family together with nothing but hope and duct tape. "Thank you, Lily," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Mark shot his sister a look, but she typed on her phone as if the moment happening 3 feet away was beneath her attention. Henry tried not to read into it. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was embarrassed and hiding behind sarcasm. He clung to excuses the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. He opened the envelope. For a full second, no, several, he didn't understand what he was seeing. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, rushed, unmistakably Lily's, but the words cut through him like ice. "Your human waste, rot in this home." The room seemed to shrink around him. His heartbeat slowed, then thundered, then slowed again, as if even his body didn't know how to respond. He stared at the sentence, trying to make sense of it, trying to believe it was a joke, a mistake, anything other than the truth staring back at him in his child's handwriting. Mark stepped closer, voice tight. "Lily, what the hell is this?" She didn't look up. "Relax, it's just a joke." "A joke," Mark snapped. "Are you out of your mind? He's your father." Lily shrugged, finally meeting their eyes with a smirk so small and so cruel it could have split the floorboards. "He'll live." Henry lowered the card slowly, as if the words might vanish if he moved gently enough. But they didn't. They stayed, branded into him, burned deeper than any physical wound. He swallowed once, hard, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like it belonged to someone older, someone thinner, someone fading. "Excuse me for a moment," he whispered. He left the table before Mark or Lily could say anything. He didn't slam the door or raise his voice. He simply disappeared down the hallway like a man who just realized the home he'd built was no longer a place where he was loved. He closed the door and sat on the edge of the tub, the hateful card still trembling in his hands. For a long time he stared at the floor, listening to the muffled argument between his children, the anger in Mark's voice, the defensiveness in Lily's. Their words blurred into noise. None of it mattered. Only the sentence did. Human waste. Later that night, after they both left, Mark apologizing with eyes full of sorrow, Lily storming out without another word, Henry sat alone in the dark living room. The house creaked softly with winter wind, the kind of cold that slides under doors. He didn't turn on any lights, didn't move, didn't even blink much. He just stared at the card resting in his open palm. And for the first time in his life, Henry felt something inside him fracture. A quiet break, almost soundless but permanent. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Henry barely slept. The hateful birthday card sat on the coffee table where he'd placed it the night before, as if he needed proof it hadn't been a nightmare. Every time he walked past it, his eyes caught those inked words, human waste, and the same dull ache rippled through his chest. Morning light didn't soften it. Coffee didn't numb it. Nothing did. As he sat in his recliner, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold, his mind drifted, not to last night alone, but to the slow decline that had led them here. 5 years of moments he had tried to forget, now rushing back like a river breaking through a dam. He remembered the first time Lily screamed at him for not wiring her money instantly, calling him useless. The months when she disappeared entirely, only to return with new demands. The nights she insulted him on the phone, slurring her words, blaming him for problems he had no control over. The mornings she showed up with a smile only when she needed cash. Each memory clicked into place like pieces of a dark puzzle he'd refused to assemble. How many times had he told himself she was just stressed, that she'd grow out of it, that a father should endure it? Now the pattern stared him in the face, undeniable. That afternoon, Mark showed up unexpectedly, his jaw set with a tension Henry seldom saw. "Dad, I talked to Lily this morning," he said, pacing the living room like a storm trapped indoors. "I asked her what that card was supposed to mean." Henry braced himself, and Mark stopped. "She laughed, said you were being sensitive. Then she told me you're weak and dramatic." The word felt sour in Mark's mouth. "Dad, that wasn't a joke, that was cruelty." Hearing it out loud, spoken calmly by someone who loved him, hit differently than reading it in Lily's handwriting. Henry felt a prick behind his eyes, something between hurt and exhaustion. "She doesn't mean half the things she says," Henry murmured, though even he didn't believe it anymore. Mark shook his head. "No, you've been making excuses for years. She treats you like a punching bag and you just take it. That's emotional abuse, Dad." Henry flinched. Abuse. The word felt too big, too sharp, too final, but something in him recognized its truth. Still, admitting it out loud felt like betraying his own child. Before he could answer, a soft knock sounded at the front door. Nora Bennett stepped inside without waiting. She always did that when she sensed Henry wasn't okay. Her winter coat was still half-buttoned, her gray hair pulled back, her face pulled tight with concern. "Henry, I saw Mark's car and thought I'd check in." She paused, taking one look at Henry's pale, tired face. "You look shaken. What happened?" Henry opened his mouth, but no words came. Mark stepped in. Lily gave him a birthday card that was basically hate mail, and Dad's been replaying it ever since. Nora's eyes softened in the way only long-time friends can. She walked over, placing a gentle hand on Henry's shoulder. "This isn't normal, Henry. No daughter talks to her father like that. Something's wrong here." Her voice didn't accuse, didn't judge. It just told the truth he had tried to bury. Henry felt the weight of it pressing into him, heavy, undeniable. His throat tightened as he stared down at his hands. "I keep thinking I must have done something," he whispered. "Failed her somewhere, missed something." Nora knelt in front of him, her eyes steady. "Henry, love doesn't require you to destroy yourself. Whatever she's battling, she's choosing to take it out on you." Mark nodded firmly. "And you don't deserve that, not anymore." Henry's breath wavered. The room felt too quiet, too intimate, as if every unspoken thought had suddenly grown a voice. For years, he'd clung to the belief that if he stayed patient, if he kept giving, if he kept forgiving, Lily would find her way back to the person she used to be. The girl who baked cookies with her mother. The teenager who used to sit next to him on the porch and talk about her plans for the world. But that girl was gone, or buried so deep Henry no longer knew where to look. "I don't know how to stop loving her," he finally said, the confession raw and trembling. "You don't have to stop loving her," Nora replied softly. "You have to stop letting her hurt you." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Henry leaned back, closing his eyes as a long, unsteady breath left him. The truth he'd resisted for so long settled into his bones. Love alone wasn't enough to survive this. Not anymore. Lily's cruelty wasn't a phase. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a force eroding him piece by piece. For the first time, the possibility crept in, cold and painful, yet clarifying. If he didn't protect himself soon, he wasn't sure he'd survive her. The thought lingered, sharp as winter air, leaving Henry staring into a future that suddenly felt far more dangerous than he'd ever allowed himself to imagine. The next morning, Henry tried, honestly tried, to pretend nothing had changed. He washed the breakfast dishes, shuffled through his mail, watered the ferns by the window. He even turned on the old radio in the kitchen, letting a soft 70s station fill the house the way it used to when his wife was alive. If he kept moving, if he stayed busy, maybe the sting of Lily's words would fade. But every quiet moment reminded him. Every pause let the memory crawl back to the surface. The envelope, the handwriting, the sentence that felt like a knife carved straight into his chest. His hands trembled more than usual. His heart beat unevenly. He kept telling himself he was fine, that this heaviness was just exhaustion, but deep down he recognized it for what it really was. A wound you couldn't point to, a bruise no one could see. He was wiping down the counter when the front door burst open without a knock. Lily's footsteps hit the hardwood like she owned the house. Henry stiffened instantly. "There you are," she said, stepping into the kitchen with a look that was everything except loving. "We need to talk." Henry swallowed. His voice came out thin. "Lily now isn't. I'm short on rent." She tossed the words like scraps on a table. "I need $900 today." She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't worried. She was entitled the way she'd become over the past years, expecting him to absorb every mistake, every crisis, every consequence. Henry gripped the counter to steady himself. "I can't keep giving you money," he said quietly. "Not right now." She blinked once, stunned not by the refusal, but by the fact he dared to say it. Then her mouth curled into something sharp. "Oh, I get it. You're still sulking about that stupid birthday card." Henry winced. "Lily, those words hurt." "Please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You're weak, Dad. You're dramatic. You always have been." She stepped closer, lowering her voice with venomous precision. "No wonder Mom ran herself into the grave." It was less like being stabbed and more like being punched in a place already broken. Henry felt the room tilt, his breath shrinking to something shallow and painful. The mention of his wife, her death, her suffering, weaponized like ammunition, cut deeper than anything Lily had ever said. His knees almost buckled. "Lily," he whispered, barely able to speak. "Oh, don't do this," she snapped. "Don't act like the victim. You owe me. After everything you did wrong while we were growing up, you should be grateful I even talked to you." Henry's throat tightened until it hurt. His hands went numb. He'd seen anger in his daughter before, but never this level of cold calculation. This wasn't frustration. It wasn't immaturity. It was cruelty. And it was intentional. From outside, a voice cut through Lily's tirade. "Is everything all right in there?" Nora Bennett's footsteps approached the open door. She'd been working in her yard across the street, close enough to hear the tension. When she stepped into the doorway, her expression shifted instantly, first confusion, then alarm, then something protective. "Nora," Henry whispered, ashamed of how broken he must look. Lily whirled around. "This is none of your business." Nora's gaze narrowed. "When I hear yelling at a 70-year-old man, it becomes my business." Then to Henry, softer, "Do you need me to call the police?" The color drained from Lily's face, not fear, rage. "Are you serious? You take his side. He owes me money. He owes me everything." Henry sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Nora stepped between them instinctively. "Henry doesn't owe you anything, Lily. You can't just barge in here and verbally attack him." Lily's voice rose to a shriek. "You all act like I'm the villain. Fine, you want me gone, I'll go, but he's going to regret this. You hear me, Dad, you owe me." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. The house fell quiet, except for Henry's shallow, unsteady breaths. Nora gently touched his shoulder. "Henry, sit with me, please." But he already was seated, folded in on himself like a man crumpling under invisible weight. Words Lily had thrown at him ricocheted inside his skull, each one darker than the last. He had spent years blaming himself, believing her sharpness came from pain or confusion or youth. But now he saw the truth. The card wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the worst of it. It was the climax of a pattern he had ignored for far too long. A slow, steady deterioration of love into resentment. A daughter who didn't just hurt him. She sharpened her cruelty deliberately, precisely, repeatedly. And as Henry pressed a trembling hand to his chest, trying to steady the ache radiating through him, one thought rose with terrifying clarity. If this continued, he didn't know how much more of Lily he could survive. The bruise she left wasn't on his skin. It was lodged deeper. And it was spreading. Henry had walked into law offices before, years ago, when he and his wife set up their first will, imagining a distant future filled with grandchildren and family reunions. Back then, stepping into an attorney's office felt like planning for a life that would keep unfolding. Today, it felt like stepping into a confession booth. Samuel Price's office was quiet, warmly lit, lined with shelves full of thick legal volumes. A space meant to make people feel protected. Henry didn't feel protected. He felt hollow, as if every ounce of energy had been siphoned from him over the past week. He sat down in the leather chair across from Samuel and clasped his hands together to stop them from shaking. Samuel, a seasoned man with a steady gaze and the calm voice of someone who had seen too much, closed the door and returned to his desk. "Henry," he said gently, "your message sounded urgent. What's going on?" Henry swallowed, feeling his throat tighten. I need to make changes to my will." The words came out slow, heavy, like he had to drag them up from somewhere deep. Samuel pulled a notepad toward him. "All right, what kind of changes are we talking about?" Henry hesitated. Saying it out loud meant admitting things he'd spent years denying. "I want Lily removed," he finally said, "from everything." Samuel's pen stopped mid-line. His eyebrows lifted, not out of judgment but genuine surprise. "Completely removed? That's a major shift, Henry. Can I ask why?" Henry reached into his coat pocket. His fingers brushed against the envelope, the same envelope he had been avoiding looking at since the night he received it. He placed it on the desk with trembling fingers, pushing it towards Samuel as though it were something dangerous. Samuel opened it casually at first, then slowly, then stopped completely. The attorney's eyes focused on the handwritten message, his expression tightening as he read the words. "Your human waste, rot in this home." He looked up, his voice low. "Henry, your daughter wrote this." Henry nodded, his throat closing. "On my birthday." Samuel exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. The room seemed to dim around them. "This isn't just hostility," he said. "This is targeted, cruel." He paused, measuring Henry's expression carefully. "How long has this been happening?" The question broke something loose. Henry explained, not in long speeches but in fragments. The insults, the demands, the manipulation, the way she had twisted guilt into a weapon, the rent money, the screaming, the comment about Henry's wife which still echoed in his body like a physical blow. By the time he finished, Samuel's face had changed from surprise to a sober understanding. "Henry," he said quietly, "you need to know something. Elder abuse is more common than people realize. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, manipulation by adult children. You are not alone in this." The reassurance didn't erase Henry's pain, but it steadied him. Hearing the word abuse from a professional, someone who didn't know his family history, someone who had nothing to gain by saying it, made everything he'd been denying feel real. Samuel folded his hands. "If Lily is acting this way now, removing her from your estate is not just your right. It may be necessary to protect yourself." Henry lowered his gaze. "I never wanted it to come to this." "None of them do," Samuel replied gently. "But your safety, your peace, has to come first." He opened a file drawer and pulled out a stack of forms. "We'll restructure everything. Your assets, your beneficiary designations, your power of attorney. We'll make sure Lily has no legal access to your finances now or later." His tone sharpened slightly, not out of anger but caution. "But Henry, you need to prepare yourself. When she realizes that the financial umbilical cord is being cut, she will retaliate." Henry's stomach nodded. "Retaliate how?" Samuel didn't overdramatize. He spoke plainly, like a man who'd watched this play out many times. "She may try guilt. She may lash out. She may escalate. Sometimes they make accusations. Sometimes they show up at the house yelling. You need documentation, witnesses, a support system." Nora Ma. RK, Officer Dalton's warning. It all connected now. Samuel slid the paperwork closer. "You are doing the right thing, but you have to be ready." Henry stared at the forms, lines waiting for signatures that would change everything. His hands trembled as he lifted the pen. Not from fear, not entirely. From grief. From the devastation of a father admitting, silently, that his bond with his daughter had become something crueler than love could survive. He signed the first page. Then the second. And the third. With every signature, a piece of hope fell away. But beneath the grief, beneath the heartbreak, something else flickered, small, fragile but present. Determination. When he finished, he set the pen down. His fingers shook, but his voice didn't. "It's time I protect myself." Samuel nodded, sliding the completed documents into a folder. "You've taken the first step, Henry, but trust me, she will feel this shift." Henry closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. Because deep down, he already knew. Whatever came next, Lily would not let go quietly. Henry had hoped, naively, that the financial separation would give him breathing room, a little space, a little peace. Instead, the peace lasted less than 48 hours. On a cold Thursday afternoon, he was sitting in the living room sorting through old paperwork when his phone buzzed with 3 rapid notifications in a row, all from Lily, all unread. He hesitated, then set the phone face down on the table. He wasn't ready for another verbal ambush. Not today. But Lily wasn't the type to wait for permission. 10 minutes later, the front door cracked open so hard it hit the wall. Henry jumped to his feet just as Lily stormed inside, her face flushed, breathing heavy, eyes blazing with a fury he hadn't seen since she was a teenager slamming doors over curfews. "What did you do?" she screamed, stepping so close he felt her breath. "Why can't I access the account? Why is everything locked?" Henry's heart thudded painfully. "Lily, please calm." "Don't you tell me to calm down," she shrieked, pacing in sharp, frantic strides. "You think you can just cut me out, cut me off like I don't matter?" "It's not like that," he tried. I need boundaries. I can't keep funding." She cut him off with a laugh, high, wild, humorless. "Boundaries? Oh, that's rich. You've been my father for 36 years and suddenly you think you get to set rules. No, no, Dad, that's not how this works." Before he could respond, she swiped her arm across the side table. A lamp crashed to the floor, smashing into glittering shards. A framed photo of Henry, his late wife, and the kids toppled over and hit the hardwood with a crack. The frame bent inward, the glass splintering across their frozen smiles. Henry flinched, not because he feared Lily would hurt him, but because watching her destroy the last photo of their family felt like a second death inside his home. "Lily, stop," he whispered, voice trembling. "Please." She didn't stop. She turned toward him with a venomous glare. "You think this house is yours? You think any of this is yours? You're old, Dad, you don't get it. One slip, one fall, one blackout, boom, nursing home." She jabbed her finger toward his chest. "Where you belong." The words hit him like cold steel. The thought of losing his home, his sanctuary, the place filled with memories of his wife, sent a wave of nausea rolling through him. He grasped the back of the couch to steady himself. Outside, a door slammed. Quick footsteps approached. Nora had heard the shouting. "Henry," she called, then froze in the doorway as she saw the chaos. The shattered lamp, the broken photo, Lily standing in the middle of the mess like a spark poised to ignite the whole room. "What is going on here?" Nora demanded. "Stay out of it," Lily snapped. "You're always spying, always meddling. Mind your own damn business." Nora stepped closer, refusing to back down. "This is my business when you storm into his house and start breaking things. I'm calling the police." Lily barked a laugh, loud and mocking. "Go ahead, call them. I'll tell them he's losing his mind, tell them he's unsafe. They'll lock him away so fast." But she didn't get to finish. A patrol car pulled into the driveway, lights flashing red against the winter sky. Officer Renee Dalton stepped out, hand already resting on her duty belt. Nora must have called earlier than Henry realized, or maybe a neighbor had heard the yelling. Either way, Lily's mouth snapped shut the moment Dalton entered the house. "Ma'am," Officer Dalton said firmly, "step away from Mr. Collins." Lily scoffed. "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous. It's just a family argument." Dalton glanced at the broken items, the trembling in Henry's hands, the wildness in Lily's eyes. "This is not an argument," she said. "This is disorderly conduct inside a private residence, and I'm giving you one warning." "One," Lily repeated mockingly. "You think I care about?" "You should," Dalton erupted, her tone dropping. "If I get another call like this, there will be charges. Do you understand?" Silence stretched for a beat, tense and vibrating with unspoken threats. Then Lily rolled her eyes, laughed under her breath, and grabbed her purse. "Fine," she muttered. "You all want to gang up on me, whatever, but this isn't over." She pushed past Dalton, brushing her shoulder deliberately against the officer as she stomped out. The door slammed again, shaking the frame. Henry stood there, chest rising and falling unevenly, staring down at the debris scattered across his living room floor. The remnants of his family photo lay in jagged pieces at his feet. Officer Dalton approached him gently. "Mr. Collins, are you okay?" He nodded, but the gesture was weak, unconvincing. Nora stepped beside him, placing a steadying hand on his back. Dalton sighed softly. "I've seen situations like this before. They usually get worse before they get better." Henry swallowed, his eyes burning. He didn't want it to be true, but deep in his bones he felt the warning settle like a cold weight. Because today proved something he didn't want to admit. Lily wasn't just angry. She was spiraling, and he was the target. And whatever storm was building, it hadn't reached its peak yet. Henry woke to blue and red lights bouncing across his bedroom walls, flickering like ghosts moving through the house. For a split second, still half asleep, he thought Lily had returned, screaming, breaking things, unleashing another storm. But the knocking on the front door was calm, rhythmic, professional. He pulled on his robe and shuffled down the hallway, dread already forming a tight knot low in his stomach. When he opened the door, Officer Renee Dalton stood on the porch, winter breath fogging in the cold morning air. "Mr. Collins," she said softly, "I'm sorry to show up unannounced again, but we received a report." Henry blinked. A report about what? Dalton hesitated, as though choosing her words carefully. "Your daughter called the station last night. She reported you for elder neglect." Elder neglect. Henry felt the ground tilt, his breath catching as the meaning settled. She told you I'm neglecting myself." "More than that," Dalton said. "She claimed you're unstable, unable to care for yourself safely, and refusing medical attention." Henry's hand trembled on the doorknob. He stepped back automatically, letting Dalton enter. His voice came out thin, confused. "Why would she do that? Why would she lie like that?" Dalton lowered her notebook, her tone gentler now. "Sometimes, Mr. Collins, when a dependent person loses access to someone's finances, they retaliate. We see it more than you'd think." The sting of embarrassment hit him hard. He felt exposed, foolish, like something fragile inside him was being held up to the light. "I'm sorry," he whispered. This is my daughter." Dalton nodded. "And that makes it 10 times harder." She guided him to sit on the couch, still missing the lamp Lily had smashed the day before. The shards were gone, but the empty space felt like a reminder of everything that had cracked open inside this house. Dalton opened her notebook. "I need to document a few things for the record. Can you tell me how you're feeling? Are you able to care for yourself? Cooking, cleaning, medications?" Henry answered each question honestly, his voice steady enough, his mind clear, his independence intact. Dalton made notes, occasionally glancing at him with a look that said she had already drawn her own conclusions. "Mr. Collins," she finally said, closing the notebook, "I don't believe you're neglecting yourself, and nothing about your condition suggests you're unsafe." He felt a wave of relief, but it was thin, quickly replaced by something darker. Lily hadn't just lashed out. She hadn't just gotten angry. She had weaponized the system against him. Before Dalton could say more, the front door swung open. Mark rushed in, hair tousled, jacket half-zipped, eyes blazing with fury. "Dad, I saw the police car outside. What happened?" Dalton stepped aside. "Your sister filed a false welfare report." Mark stared at her, stunned. Then the shock gave way to a heat that rose up his neck. "She did what?" Henry put up a hand, his voice shaking. "Mark, please, let's not make this worse." Mark paced the living room, hands on his hips, trying to contain his rage. "Dad, this is insane. She's crossed every line possible. She's trying to turn the police against you." "She's hurting," Henry murmured weakly. Mark turned sharply. "And what about you? You're hurting. Why are you still protecting her?" Dalton looked between them, then addressed Henry directly. "Sir, I need to ask, do you want to press charges for filing a false report? We have the authority to open an investigation." The room froze. Henry looked down at his hands, hands that had once held Lily as a baby, steadying her first steps, soothing her fevers, tucking her into bed. He saw those memories layered over the daughter who now screamed at him, broke his belongings, lied to police, and used the word nursing home like a threat. I can't," he said finally, barely above a whisper. She's still my child. I don't want to destroy her life. Mark sank onto the edge of a chair, burying his face in his hands. Dalton let out a slow exhale, not frustrated, but saddened in a way that suggested she'd seen this pattern too many times. "Mr. Collins," she said carefully, "if she's willing to lie once, she'll lie again. And next time she might do it in a way that's harder to disprove." Henry's chest tightened. The implication lingered heavy in the air. Lily wasn't spiraling blindly. She was escalating, strategic, angry, unpredictable. Dalton stood, straightening her coat. "I'll file my report as unfounded, but please be careful, and if anything else happens, call us immediately." When she left, the house felt colder than before, emptier, quieter, as though even the walls were bracing for what might come next. Henry remained seated, staring at the front window where the police lights had flickered minutes earlier. The reflection of his own face stared back at him, older, paler, more afraid than he wanted to admit. Because for the first time since Lily's decline began, he wasn't just heartbroken. He wasn't just disappointed. He was afraid of his own daughter. Henry had barely touched his breakfast. The toast sat cold on the plate, the eggs untouched, the coffee gone lukewarm beside his trembling hand. He stared at the table without seeing it, replaying Officer Dalton's warning over and over like a radio station stuck on the same grim frequency. "If she's willing to lie once, she'll lie again." The words clung to him like a cold draft seeping under the door. When Mark arrived late that afternoon, he dropped his keys on the counter with a heaviness that made Henry look up. "Dad," Mark said quietly, "we need to talk." Henry tried to wave him off. "Mark, please, I don't want to argue." "This isn't an argument." Mark pulled out a chair and sat opposite him, leaning forward with both elbows on the table. "Dad, she's destroying you, one piece at a time." The bluntness made Henry flinch, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. Mark's voice wasn't angry now. It carried something deeper, fear, frustration, and a heartbreak he'd tried to hide. Henry rubbed his eyes. "I know she's hurting me," he whispered, "but she's my daughter. I don't want to lose her completely." "You're losing yourself instead," Mark said, "and that's worse." Silence settled thick between them. Finally, Henry let out a long, shaky breath. "I kept giving in because I thought if I said no, she'd disappear, or hate me forever, and I couldn't bear that." Mark's expression softened, but he didn't look away. "Dad, you've been enabling her. I know it's not intentional, but every time you give in, she learns she can go further." Henry's shoulders slumped. The guilt felt heavy, suffocating. He'd always thought patience and sacrifice made him a good father. Now he wasn't sure what they'd made him. A quiet knock came from the doorway. Nora stepped inside, holding a folder under one arm. She had a look in her eyes Henry recognized immediately, firm, protective, determined. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said softly, "but Mark told me what happened yesterday, and the day before, and all the little things that came before that." Henry's face warmed with embarrassment. "I didn't want you getting involved." "I'm already involved," she said gently. "I care about you, Henry, and what Lily is doing isn't normal, it's dangerous." She set the folder on the table. "We need to start documenting everything, every message, every voicemail, every time she shows up unannounced." Henry swallowed. "For what purpose?" "To protect you," Mark said, "and to prove there's a pattern." Together they opened the folder. Henry watched as Nora sorted through printed screenshots Mark had pulled from Henry's phone, the long strings of angry texts, the late-night messages calling him selfish, weak, a disappointment. They played 2 voicemails on speaker, Lily slurring insults, Lily raging about money, Lily threatening to show up if he didn't answer immediately. Each recording felt like a small dagger Henry had absorbed quietly in the past, pretending it didn't pierce. Seeing them compiled, hearing them together, made something inside him sag with realization. "This is abuse," Nora said softly. You've been living under emotional attack for years." Henry pressed a hand to his forehead. He didn't cry, but his eyes burned with the weight of a truth he had never allowed himself to name. Abuse. From his own child. And he had swallowed it, excused it, absorbed it until he stopped recognizing the man he'd become, nervous, sleepless, afraid. Mark pulled another sheet from the folder. And here her bank withdrawals, the emergency fund she drained last year, the credit card you paid off twice. He shook his head. "Dad, this is a pattern, a long one." Henry stared down at the paper until his vision blurred. "How did I let it get this far?" he whispered. Nora placed a steady hand over his. "Because you love her, and love can blind even the strongest people." Before Henry could respond, his phone vibrated on the table. He nearly ignored it, his body instinctively tensing the way it did whenever Lily's name popped up. But this time, it was Lily. It was Samuel Price. Henry answered with a quiet, "Hello." Samuel's voice came through firm but urgent. "Henry, I've reviewed the documents and the timeline you gave me." A pause. "It's time for the countermove." Henry's pulse kicked hard in his chest. "The countermove," he repeated. Samuel lowered his voice, every word carrying weight. "You've defended yourself as much as you can passively. Now we prepare actively, before she escalates again." The room seemed to tighten around Henry, the air thick with the gravity of what lay ahead. Mark leaned forward. "Dad, what's he saying?" Henry slowly lowered the phone, his expression shifting, still frightened but no longer frozen. Something had changed, something unavoidable. Samuel's final words echoed in his ears, steady as a warning bell. "It's time for the countermove." Henry stood inside the small branch bank, the sterile scent of printer ink and carpet cleaner filling the air. The teller typed quickly, barely glancing up as he completed the request Henry had been avoiding for years. Closing the last joint emergency account Lily still had access to. The account had once been their safety net, a place for unexpected repairs, medical bills, the kind of emergencies families rally together to solve. But in the past 5 years, it had become something else entirely, a bottomless well Lily dipped into without warning, without permission, without remorse. "Are you sure you want this closed?" the teller asked. "Hey." Enri's fingers trembled as he signed the final form. "Yes," he whispered, "I'm sure." When he walked out into the cold afternoon, he felt both lighter and terrified. Severing that account felt like severing the last illusion that Lily still respected him. He wasn't home for more than 15 minutes before his phone erupted. One call, then another, then a string of rapid-fire notifications. Henry stared at the screen, watching Lily's name flash over and over. Finally, he forced himself to listen. Her voicemail crackled with fury. "What the hell did you do? You closed the account. Are you insane? I needed that money. You're sabotaging me. You're ruining my life on purpose. You think you're some kind of victim. You owe me. I'm your daughter. And you don't get to cut me off like this." Her voice climbed higher, sharper, dripping rage and entitlement. Then her tone flipped instantly, unnervingly. "Dad, please, I just needed help. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you abandoning me?" Another shift back to anger. "This isn't over. You're going to regret this." The message ended with a breathless click. Henry sat at his kitchen table, the phone trembling in his grip. This wasn't normal anger. This wasn't frustration. This was escalation. He forwarded the voicemail to Samuel and called him immediately. When the attorney answered, Henry's voice was shaking. "Samuel, you need to hear this." He played it on speaker. Lily's rage filled the quiet office on the other end. When the message ended, Samuel exhaled slowly. "Henry," he said, "this is a gift." Henry blinked. "A gift?" "For legal purposes, absolutely. That voicemail documents manipulation, threats, and financial expectation. Exactly the kind of evidence courts take seriously." He paused. It shows she's losing control, and that means you need to tighten yours. Tighten, protect, prepare. The words sank into Henry's chest like weights. Later that evening, Mark stopped by. Having driven over the moment Henry texted him about the voicemail. He listened to it with his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped near his temple. "That's it," Mark said sharply. "We're installing cameras. Front porch, back porch, driveway, inside if you're comfortable. I don't care if she says she just wants to talk. She's unpredictable, Dad. And she's crossed every line." Henry didn't argue. He was too tired to. Too worn down by fear, disappointment, and the slow erosion of trust. While Mark drove to pick up the camera equipment, Nora came over with her spare toolbox and a quiet determination that reminded Henry of his wife. Steady, unshakable, practical in a crisis. "We're changing your locks," she said simply, already unpacking tools. "If she still has a spare key, and I'm certain she does, she should not be able to walk in whenever she wants." Henry watched as Nora unscrewed the old deadbolt, her hands sure and confident. The metallic click of the lock being removed felt symbolic, like a barrier finally forming where none had existed before. By the time Mark returned, the new locks were installed, and Nora was wiping dust from her hands. But Lily wasn't finished. As the evening darkened, Henry's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Messages came in waves, first angry, then apologetic, then manipulative. "How could you do this to me? Dad, please, you're the only one I have. You're abandoning me like everyone else. You owe me after everything I've been through. You are ruining my life, answer me." Each message twisted in its own direction. Threat, guilt, desperation, accusation. Like she was pulling emotional levers trying to find the one that would make Henry cave. He didn't respond. He couldn't. At Samuel's suggestion, Henry opened a lined notebook that Nora set on the table. He wrote down the day's events in shaky handwriting. Closed emergency account. Voicemail at 3:47 p.m. threatening retaliation. 10 texts between 6-7 p.m., alternating blame and guilt. Lock changed, cameras going in tomorrow. He paused, breathing unevenly. This wasn't just journaling. This was documentation. Protection. Self-defense. For the first time, Henry fully understood the shift that had taken place. He wasn't managing a troubled daughter anymore. He was managing a threat. He set the pen down slowly, staring at the page, his own words staring back at him. And deep in his chest, a quiet truth settled. This wasn't going to de-escalate. Not on its own. Not with patience. Not with love. Whatever came next, he had to be ready. Henry had finally drifted into a shallow, fragile sleep when the first blow rattled the front door. A sharp, violent pounding, so loud it shook the picture frames on the hallway wall. He jolted awake, heart slamming against his ribs. For a disoriented moment, he thought it might be a dream, some lingering echo of his own anxiety. But then came another hit, and another. "Dad, open the door. Open it right now." Henry froze. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed 1:03 a.m. The world outside his window was pitch black, the neighborhood silent except for the frantic pounding and the drunken slur in Lily's voice. He pushed himself out of bed, his legs shaky beneath him, and crept down the hallway toward the living room. The new deadbolt Nora had installed glinted in the low light, solid, mercifully secure. "Dad," Lily shrieked, slamming her fist against the wood. "I know you're in there. Open this door." He stayed several feet back, fear crawling up his spine like cold fingers. He didn't dare approach the doorway. Not tonight. Not with her voice sounding like this, unhinged, soaked in alcohol and ready to explode. Lily hit the door again, harder. "You're abusing me," she screamed, pitching her voice louder so the entire cul-de-sac could hear. You're emotionally abusing your own daughter." Henry flinched at the accusation, even though he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, how backward it was. But shouting a lie often enough didn't make it true. Still, hearing his daughter weaponize that word against him hollowed something inside him. He stepped farther back, his breath unsteady. Outside, porch lights flicked on one by one as neighbors peered out from behind curtains. The quiet, peaceful street, normally a haven of early-to-bed retirees and young families, now pulsed with the kind of tension that made dogs bark in yards and people whisper behind glass. Across the street, Nora's door opened. She stepped onto her porch, robe tied tight, her phone already in her hand. She didn't shout, didn't confront. She simply hit record and filmed Lily pacing on the doorstep like a storm trapped in a single body. "Dad, if you don't let me in, I'm calling the police," Lily screamed. "I'll tell them you're not safe. I'll tell them you're losing it." Henry closed his eyes, pressing a trembling hand to the wall to steady himself. He'd expected things to escalate. Samuel had warned him. Nora had warned him. Even Officer Dalton had warned him. But he hadn't expected this. His own daughter in the middle of the night, trying to tear down his door and his dignity at the same time. The pounding grew louder, now mixed with the scrape of something, metal, maybe a ring, dragging viciously against the wood. Henry backed into the hallway, pulse thundering. Then, through the distorted glass of the front door, he saw red and blue lights wash across the porch. A police cruiser pulled up silently, lights flashing but siren off. Relief washed through Henry so abruptly his knees nearly gave out. Officer Renee Dalton stepped out, her expression already hardened with familiarity. "Lily Collins," she called out, "step away from the door." Lily spun around, hair wild, mascara smudged, her posture swaying. "Oh look, they're here for him," she slurred loudly. "Good, maybe now you'll listen, HES abusing ME." Dalton approached, calm but direct. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice and step back from the property." "I'm his daughter," Lily snapped, waving her arms dramatically. "I have every right to be here." "You do not," Dalton said firmly. "Your father has a right to ask you to leave, and you were told last week, explicitly, to stay off the property unless invited." "That was a misunderstanding," Lily shouted. "He's confused, he doesn't know what he's doing." Nora zoomed in with her phone from across the street, capturing everything. Lily's slurred words, her erratic movements, Dalton's calm but unwavering stance. Dalton took one more step forward. "Lily, this is your final warning. Leave now or I will place you under arrest for disorderly conduct and violation of the previous warning." For a moment it looked like Lily might fight, argue, or throw something. Her hands clenched at her sides, trembling with intoxicated rage. But then her eyes flicked to the neighbors watching, to Nora filming, to the police lights illuminating every inch of her. She stumbled backward with a hollow laugh. "Fine, fine, but this isn't over. You'll all regret this, especially you, Dad." She pointed at the door, at Henry, like she was delivering a curse. Then she staggered down the steps, climbed into her car, and sped away too fast for the quiet hour of night. When the sound of her engine faded, Dalton exhaled, her posture softening. She approached the door and tapped lightly. "Mr. Collins, are you all right?" Henry didn't open it. He couldn't trust his legs to carry him that far. Instead, he leaned against the wall and called back, voice cracking, I'm okay." "Call me if she returns," Dalton said gently, "and please try to get some rest." When the cruiser pulled away, the neighborhood lights slowly clicked off one by one. Silence returned. But inside the house, Henry collapsed into a chair, his body shaking with a mixture of fear, grief, and something harder to name, an exhaustion that seeped into his bones. Because tonight proved something he had been trying not to accept. A line had been crossed. A line that could never be uncrossed. And whatever happened next, he knew Lily was far from done. Henry wasn't expecting a call from Samuel so early in the morning. The sun had barely risen, and Henry was still moving through his kitchen like a man made of sore bones, slow, stiff, hollowed out from another sleepless night. The memory of Lily pounding on his door lingered like an echo inside his skull. When the phone rang, he flinched before reaching for it. "Henry," Samuel said without preamble, his tone clipped, controlled, worried. "I need you to come to my office, today." Henry's stomach tightened. What happened? "Bring Mark if you can," Samuel added. "This isn't something I want to explain over the phone." The unease in the attorney's voice said everything Henry was too scared to ask. He hung up, called Mark, and within 30 minutes they were walking into Samuel's office, Henry with a tremor in his steps, Mark with anger already simmering beneath the surface. Samuel didn't sit. He stood behind his desk with a single sheet of paper in his hand, his jaw tight. "I'm just going to show you this," he said quietly. He handed Henry the document. It was a bank-issued fraud alert. And at the top in bold text, "Suspicious credit application flagged. Applicant attempted to open a revolving account using your social security number." Below it, in Lily's handwriting in the digital signature field, was her name, signed as if she owned every part of him, including his identity. Henry's vision blurred. The room seemed to tip sideways. "No," he whispered. "No, she would." Mark snatched the paper, reading it in 2 sharp breaths. His face went red with fury. "She tried to open a credit card in your name. Dad, this is fraud. This is identity theft." Samuel nodded grimly. "It qualifies as attempted financial fraud, yes." Henry reached for the back of a chair, steadying himself as nausea rose in his chest. Why would she do this? Samuel gave him a sad, knowing look. Because she knew she no longer had access to your money. This was her attempt to regain it by force. When financial dependence turns into desperation, some adult children cross legal lines. Henry closed his eyes. It felt like something inside him, something deep, paternal, long-suffering, finally cracked apart. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come with a scream or a gasp. It was a quiet shattering. "She tried to steal my life," Henry whispered. "Not just money, my name, my identity." His voice shook. "She doesn't love me at all." Mark dropped into a chair, rubbing his hands over his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say anymore." Samuel sat down slowly, folding his hands. "Henry, this isn't your fault. People who manipulate often escalate when their control slips. This is exactly why we began documenting everything." Henry didn't respond. He couldn't. His heart felt like it was collapsing inward, crushed under the weight of realization. The daughter he'd raised, the daughter he'd protected, the daughter he'd forgiven over and over had crossed into deliberate criminal betrayal. Samuel cleared his throat. "I've already spoken with Officer Dalton. She'll file an official report to ensure you're protected from any additional financial fallout. This will secure your credit, flag any new attempts, and ensure that nothing tied to your information can be opened without verification." Henry imagined Lily sitting in her car, angrily scribbling his social security number onto an application, not once thinking about the damage she'd inflict, the consequences she'd cause, the father whose life she was tearing apart. The sickness in his stomach deepened. Mark leaned forward, fury sharpened into something cold and focused. "What happens next?" Samuel slid a new set of documents across the desk. "Next, Henry, we file for a protective order." Henry's breath caught. "A restraining order." "Yes," Samuel said gently. "A protective order specifically addressing harassment, financial exploitation, and threats. You now have enough evidence to justify it. And Henry," he paused, making sure his client was truly listening, "this is about your safety and your stability. You cannot live like this anymore." Henry stared at the papers, the legal language swimming in front of him. A protective order meant acknowledging, publicly, legally, that Lily was a danger to him. It meant driving another wedge into a relationship already split wide open. But what relationship was left? I never wanted to fight her, Henry whispered, emotion choking his throat. I only ever wanted her to be okay. Mark reached over and placed a hand on his father's shoulder. You tried, Dad. You tried more than anyone could. His voice thickened. But she's crossed too many lines. You have to protect yourself. Samuel slid a pen toward him. I'll handle every step of the process. You just need to sign. Henry lifted the pen, but his hand trembled so violently he had to steady it with the other. Every stroke of TH. E's signature felt like a funeral, for trust, for hope, for the father-daughter bond he'd spent decades believing could survive anything. When he finished, he set the pen down with a slow exhale that felt like it drained the air from his lungs. Samuel collected the documents, his expression firm. I'll file these today. Henry, this was the right decision. Henry nodded weakly, but inside he felt neither right nor strong. For the first time, he wasn't mourning the daughter he once had. He was mourning the daughter he now knew had never truly existed. And outside Samuel's office window, the winter wind howled, like the world warning him that things were far from over. The morning the papers were delivered was colder than usual, one of those Ohio mornings where frost clings to every surface, even the air. Henry sat in his recliner, staring at the muted television without absorbing a single word. He knew the moment was coming. Samuel had filed everything 2 days earlier: the protective order, the fraud documentation, the affidavit outlining Lily's escalating harassment. Still, knowing something is coming and feeling it arrive are two entirely different things. At 10:17 a.m., Samuel called. It's been served, he said simply. Henry closed his eyes, his chest tightening. How did she react? A pause. You'll hear soon enough. He didn't have to wait long. 30 minutes later, the sound of screeching tires tore through the quiet neighborhood. Henry jerked upright as Lily's car swerved toward his house, stopping crooked at the edge of the yard. The court papers, still under the wiper where the process server had left them, fluttered wildly in the wind. Lily stepped out like a storm refusing to be contained. You filed a protective order against me, she screamed, voice raw and jagged. You're investigating me for fraud. Henry's breath collapsed inward. He stood in the doorway but didn't step outside, not with her like this. Lily stormed toward the porch, fury twisting her face. How could you do this to your own daughter? You're sick. You're twisted. Henry shook his head, voice barely a whisper. Lily, please stop. But she didn't. She climbed the steps, closing the distance as if she intended to force her way inside. I should be investigating you, she shrieked. You're old and confused and you let people control you. Henry stepped back, his heart pounding in his throat. The protective order said she wasn't allowed within 50 feet of him. She was now less than 5. Before Lily could advance another step, a familiar police SUV turned onto the street. Officer Dalton. Lights on, no siren, fast. She pulled into Henry's driveway with practiced speed and stepped out before the vehicle had fully settled. Lily Collins, Dalton barked, back away from the porch now. Lily spun, hair flying, eyes blazing. SHES lying, she screamed. I'm just trying to talk to HIM. You are in violation of a court order, Dalton shot back, already moving toward her. Back away from the property or you will be detained immediately. Lily's expression flickered, a mix of shock, fury, and something dangerously close to panic. HES, my father, I have a right. You have no right to be here, Dalton cut in sharply. Not anymore, step back now. For a tense second, Henry feared she might resist, fight, lash out. Instead, Lily let out a guttural scream, spun around, kicked a patch of snow, and stormed back toward her car. This isn't over, she shouted at Henry. You're going to regret this. Dalton followed her down the steps but didn't touch her, just made sure she left. When Lily slammed into her driver's seat and peeled away, the neighborhood finally exhaled. Dalton returned to the porch. "Mr. Collins," she said gently, "you did the right thing calling us earlier this week. Without documentation, this would be much harder." Henry nodded, though his legs shook beneath him. "Thank you," he managed. Once Dalton left, Mark appeared. He'd driven over the moment he saw Lily's car speeding away. He found Henry still standing in the doorway, pale, trembling. "Dad," Mark whispered, pulling him into a steadying embrace. "I'm so sorry." Henry clung to him, breath shuddering. I never wanted it to come to this." Mark held his father tighter. "I know, but you didn't choose this, Dad, she did." When Henry finally released him, they stepped inside. He sank into his recliner as though gravity had doubled. His body felt heavy with equal parts guilt and relief, a confusing, painful mix that left him exhausted. The front door opened again, softly this time. "Nora." She carried a casserole dish, still warm, wrapped in a towel, but her eyes were fixed on Henry, full of concern. "I saw the patrol car," she said quietly. "I thought you might need company." Henry's voice cracked. "She came here screaming. I didn't think she could still shock me, but she did." Nora set the dish down and sat in the chair across from him. "Henry," she said gently, "you're grieving. You're grieving the daughter you thought she was. That's one of the hardest losses a parent can face." Tears welled in Henry's eyes, though he blinked them back. "I kept hoping she'd come back," he whispered, "that the real Lily was in there somewhere." Nora reached out and took his hand. "Maybe one day she'll change, but right now she's hurting you, and choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival." Mark sat beside his father and nodded. "Dad, you did what you had to." Henry stared at his trembling hands, the papers served, the screaming, the police, the realization settling deeply, painfully. Maybe the daughter he raised, the child he loved fiercely and without condition, was gone. And maybe she wasn't coming back. When Samuel called an hour later to check in, Henry managed to respond. "This isn't revenge, Henry," Samuel said firmly through the phone. "This is defense, and it's necessary." Henry closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. Defense. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Protection. But even as he accepted it, a cold truth lingered in the quiet of his living room. He had crossed a line today, and there was no returning to the way things were. It started with looks, small, fleeting glances from neighbors Henry had known for decades, men who'd borrowed his. Later, women who'd brought over casseroles when his wife passed, couples who waved every morning from their porches. Now their smiles felt tighter. Their eyes lingered a little too long. Their greetings were strained, hesitant, polite in a way that didn't feel real. Henry sensed it before anyone told him. Something had shifted. The truth revealed itself 2 days later when Nora knocked on his door, her expression taut with anger. "Henry," she said, not bothering to sit, "we need to talk about what Lily S. been saying." He sighed, his stomach tightening. "What now?" Nora took a breath as though preparing to deliver a diagnosis no one wanted to hear. "She's been going door to door on this street, telling people you're senile, that you're abusive, that she's the only one who takes care of you." Henry's face drained of color. "What?" "She's telling folks you're unstable," Nora continued, "that the protective order is part of a mental decline. She's twisting everything." Henry pressed a hand over his eyes. Shame, heavy, hot, suffocating, washed through him, not because he believed any of it, but because neighbors might, because Lily knew exactly how to hit him where he was most vulnerable. Nora touched his arm gently. "I confronted 2 neighbors this morning. They admitted Lily stopped them on their walks and fed them this nonsense. I told them the truth, Henry. They apologized. They said they didn't know who to believe." Henry felt the blow of that more sharply than he expected. His world was shrinking, his home, his health, his relationships, piece by piece. Later that afternoon, Officer Dalton visited again. Not for an emergency this time, but to gather statements. She sat at Henry's kitchen table, notebook open, listening as he recounted what Nora told him. "You're not the only one she approached," Dalton said. "We've spoken with 6 neighbors already. Lily gave each of them a different story. Some said you locked her out unfairly. Others said you were violent. One even claimed you threatened her with a knife." Henry's mouth fell open. "A knife? I've never." "I know," Dalton said firmly. "Everyone's stories contradict each other. That's good for you. Very good." She closed her notebook with a soft thud. People who lie usually forget to keep their lies consistent. Henry sat back, exhaling shakily. Embarrassment still clung to him, but beneath it, something steadier formed. A stubborn determination not to let these lies define him. When Dalton left, Mark arrived not long after, his expression serious. He walked through the house like a man preparing for battle, checking the doors, the cameras, the locks. "Dad," he said finally, sitting across from Henry at the dining table, "I'm calling a family meeting. Without Lily." Henry looked at him, weariness softening his features. "Who's left besides you and me?" "Me, you, and Nora," Mark said. "And Samuel on speaker. We need a plan. She's spiraling, and every time she does, you get hit in the crossfire." Henry nodded slowly. He didn't want a meeting. He wanted a daughter who loved him. But that wasn't the world he lived in anymore. That evening, the 4 of them gathered in Nora's living room. The soft crackle of her fireplace filled the silence. Samuel joined through a call placed on the coffee table. "Henry," Samuel said, voice steady and measured, "I'm aware of the rumors Lily is spreading. I've already begun building a defamation record." Henry glanced up startled. "Defamation?" "Yes," Samuel replied. "Every false claim she makes, every accusation, every contradictory story is logged. It protects you legally, and if she attempts anything further, it strengthens your position significantly." Nora folded her arms. "People are already starting to see through her. Most neighbors don't even believe her anymore." Mark leaned in. "Dad, she's losing control. And when people lose control, they reach, they grasp, they invent things to stay relevant." He paused. "But the truth always wins out in the long run." Henry looked between the 3 faces supporting him. Mark's fierce loyalty, Nora's unwavering steadiness, Samuel's calm authority. For the first time in weeks, the lies swirling around him felt containable, manageable, exposed to the light. He felt a strange lightness settle into his chest. Not joy, not relief, but clarity. Lily's lies weren't gaining power. They were losing it. Neighbors who spoke to her were already whispering about her contradictions. Some even came to Henry privately, offering reassurance, apologizing for believing anything at all. And through the fog of heartbreak, Henry finally saw it. Her voice was growing weaker. The truth was speaking louder. He wasn't sinking. He wasn't collapsing. He was quietly, steadily standing back up. But another realization followed, painful in its honesty. If Lily's lies were slipping, she would try something else, something bigger, something louder. And whatever that was, it was coming. Soon. Henry had just finished sweeping the front hallway when he saw Lily's car approaching through the narrow frosted window beside his door. No screeching tires this time, no drunken swerving. She pulled in with eerie control, parking neatly at the curb. For a moment, Henry allowed himself a fragile hope. Maybe she'd come to apologize. Maybe she'd sobered up and seen how far she'd fallen. But when she stepped out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame, Henry felt that hope crumble before it fully formed. Lily's face was clean, her hair brushed, her step steady. She wasn't intoxicated. She wasn't confused. She was furious. She marched straight up the walkway and pounded on the door with the flat of her hand. "Open UP, Dad," she yelled. "We're doing this today." Henry stayed where he was, halfway down the hallway. His breath tightened, but he forced himself to take a slow step forward. Then another. He wouldn't open the door, but he also wouldn't hide. He reached the entryway and spoke through the wood. "Lily, what do you want?" "What do I want?" she repeated with a laugh that held no humor. "I want what you stole from me." Henry frowned. "I haven't stolen anything." "Oh, really?" She banged the door again. "You cut me out of the accounts. You filed a protective order. You ruined my reputation with your lies, and now," her voice pitched higher, sharp as broken glass, "I want my inheritance. I deserve it." Henry closed his eyes. The last thread that bound them, however frayed, however painful, felt like it snapped with those words. "Lily," he said, voice low but steady, "inheritance is not something you demand, and certainly not something you earn through threats." She hit the door again. "You owe me, Mom always said." "She never said that," Henry whispered. Lily growled in frustration and kicked the lower panel of the door. "You're pathetic. You're letting strangers control you, Mark, that nosy neighbor, your fancy lawyer. Without me, you'd be nothing." Henry swallowed. He felt the sting of her words, but something in him had changed in recent weeks. Some internal seam had tightened. He stood straighter, steadier. "I'm not opening this door," he said. "Not anymore." "Why?" she shrieked. Henry answered softly, honestly. "You used words that cut pieces of me away." There was a silence, brief, stunned. Then Lily exploded. "Oh, please," she screamed. "You're acting like some victim when you're the one who owes me everything. I deserve the money, Dad, all of it." Her voice cracked on the last word, not from emotion but from the sheer force she put into it. Henry felt a tremor move through him, not fear, but grief mixed with finality. "Go home, Lily," he said. "There is nothing for you here." The air outside shifted. Something primitive in her stilled, then snapped. Without warning, Lily grabbed the large ceramic flower pot sitting beside the porch step. One Nora had helped Henry fill with winter greens, and hurled it sideways. It smashed into the walkway with a violent shatter, soil exploding across the concrete. Henry jumped despite himself. "You can't ignore me forever," she screamed. "You owe me, you owe me." She stomped back to her car, flung open the driver's door, and sped off with tires shrieking across the quiet cul-de-sac. For a long moment, Henry remained frozen behind the door, his breath tight, his pulse flickering like a weak flame. Only when he saw Nora crossing the street did he finally unlock it, barely opening it enough for her to slip inside. She glanced at him, then at the shattered pot on the walkway. "Let me help," she said softly. They walked outside together. Nora knelt, scooping handfuls of soil back into the broken pot pieces. Henry joined her, moving slowly, carefully. The cold air stung his cheeks, but somehow it steadied him. "This wasn't your fault," Nora murmured, gathering shards into a pile. "Her anger isn't your burden to carry anymore." Henry nodded, though his eyes watered, not from the wind. When they finished, Nora brushed her gloves together. "Come inside, you need warmth, and a moment to breathe." As they stepped in, a police car rolled up the street. Henry's stomach tightened until he saw Officer Dalton step out, calm but purposeful. "Mr. Collins," Dalton said, walking toward the porch, "I reviewed the footage from your cameras, and your neighbor's recording." She glanced at the broken pot. "That's enough to upgrade the protective order. I'm filing the paperwork tonight." Henry exhaled, slow and shaky. Dalton softened her tone. "You're doing the right thing, sir. She's escalating, and this will give you the protection you need." Henry nodded, though part of him felt like he'd lost something irreversible. After Dalton left, he sank into his recliner while Nora made tea in the kitchen. He listened to the familiar clink of mugs, the hum of the kettle, the sound of someone caring for him when caring for himself felt impossible. As he wrapped his hands around the warm cup Nora set before him, the tea, Ruth finally settled. The daughter he raised, the girl who once ran into his arms after school, who baked cookies at Christmas, who cried when her mother died, was gone, and he didn't know if she would ever come back. Lily's unraveling didn't happen in one dramatic collapse. It came in waves, each one harder than the last, each one pushing her farther from the life she had clung to with entitlement and fury. The first blow struck on a gray Tuesday morning. Henry learned about it not from Lily, but from Mark, who arrived on Henry's porch holding his phone like it contained something radioactive. "Dad, you need to see this." He played a voicemail forwarded by one of Lily's former coworkers, someone who still felt a sliver of sympathy for her, despite everything. The message was short, clinical, unforgiving. Lily Collins has been terminated effective immediately due to erratic workplace conduct and ongoing legal complications. Henry sank into a chair, fired. Part of him knew it was inevitable. Her temper, her instability, the escalating chaos she dragged into every room. But another part of him still felt sick. She had lost her job, and she hadn't even tried to tell him. Mark watched his father carefully. "This isn't your fault," he said softly. "Maybe, but it still hurt." 3 days later came the eviction. This time Nora brought the news, her voice tight with worry. "Her landlord came by my house looking for you. He thought maybe you knew her whereabouts." She swallowed. "He said she's 3 months behind on rent. He already filed the notice." Henry closed his eyes. He saw Lily packing up her belongings in anger, not sorrow, throwing things into bags, cursing the world, blaming everyone but herself. The image was too vivid, too easy to picture. "Does she have anywhere to go?" Henry whispered. Nora hesitated. "I don't know, Henry, but she can't stay there." The eviction notice hit Henry harder than her job loss. Employment came and went, but losing a home, that meant she was adrift, unsecured, unstable. A father's instinct to protect surged through him, sharp, immediate, dangerous. But Samuel's words echoed through him like a warning bell. "You cannot save someone who is destroying you in the process." He tried to hold on to that. 2 more days passed before the next blow landed, this one personal in a way Henry couldn't brace for. Mark walked in without knocking, pale and angry. "Dad, she's living in her car." The words landed like a punch to Henry's chest. "What do you mean?" "I mean she's sleeping in it, behind that old strip mall on Ridgeway Road." Mark paced, running a hand through his hair. "I drove by, I saw her. She looks rough, Dad." Henry's breath shook. A painful ache radiated through him, love twisted with heartbreak, compassion battling the memory of threats, insults, and smashed ceramic pots. She was still his daughter, and she was suffering. "I should help her," Henry murmured, his voice cracking. "No," Mark said immediately, stopping in front of him. "Dad, listen, you have done everything. Given her money, time, forgiveness, chances. And she used everyone to hurt you more. You step in now and she'll drag you under all over again." Henry pressed both hands to his face. "But she's living out of her car." Mark's voice softened but didn't waver. "You didn't put her there. Her choices did." Later that evening, Henry called Samuel, unable to fight the internal war alone. Samuel listened patiently as Henry described the job loss, the eviction, the desperation creeping into Lily's life. When Henry fell quiet, Samuel spoke gently but firmly. "Her instability is exactly why you must maintain distance. She is not safe right now, not for herself and certainly not for you." Henry swallowed hard. "But she's my child." "And you're a man trying to survive," Samuel countered. "Stepping back isn't abandonment, it's necessary." Henry knew Samuel was right. That didn't make it easier. The final blow came just after midnight. Henry heard the voicemail before he saw the missed call. Lily's voice filled the dark kitchen when he pressed play, low, cold, unhinged in a way he had never heard. "You think you can ruin me. You think you can cut me out and hide behind your lawyer? Fine, do it. But I'll make you regret this, Dad, I swear it. The silence after the message was louder than the threat itself. Henry stood frozen, the phone heavy in his hand. He wasn't shocked, not anymore, but something inside him tightened, a hardening he could feel beneath his ribs. When he forwarded the voicemail to Samuel, the attorney called back within minutes. "Henry," Samuel said, voice sharper than usual, "that message just sealed her fate." Henry blinked, exhausted. "What does that mean?" "It means the court will no longer question your need for protection. It means Lily has crossed into a category of risk the system takes extremely seriously." Samuel exhaled slowly. "And it means we move forward with the next step of securing your safety, Fu. Ellie and legally." Henry leaned against the counter, his knees weak. Her life was crumbling, and she wanted to drag him down with her. He stared into the dim kitchen, the voicemail still echoing in his mind, Lily's final bitter promise. And for the first time, Henry believed she meant every word. Henry didn't intend to listen to the voicemail again. He'd already played it twice, once in disbelief, once in heartbreak. But something in him, something bruised and raw, pressed replay anyway, as if hearing the words one more time might help him understand how his daughter had become someone he could no longer recognize. The message began with a shaky breath, then Lily's voice, cold, sharp, unfiltered. "I know you heard my last message," she said. "And guess what? I meant every word. You think that stupid birthday card just happened. No, I sent it to hurt you on purpose, because you deserve it." Henry's grip tightened on the phone. The air seemed to thin around him. Lily continued, unhinged but disturbingly clear. "You're old, Dad, old and useless, and you're so easy to break. One little sentence ruins your whole week. Pathetic." A small, humorless laugh followed, one Henry had never heard from her before. "I'm going to ruin you financially if you don't fix this. Do you hear me? I'll find a way. You think lawyers and cops can protect you. They can't. I'll take everything, and when I'm done, you're going to wish you'd stayed quiet." The message ended with a long exhale, almost a hiss, before the soft click cut the world quiet. Henry lowered the phone onto the table and pressed both hands to his face. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply sat there, feeling something inside him fold in on itself, something that had been holding on far too long. It wasn't just the threat. It wasn't even the admission about the card. It was the intention, the deliberate cruelty, the joy she'd taken in hurting him. Lily wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She wasn't spiraling blindly. She knew exactly what she was doing. When Henry finally lifted his head, he reached for the phone again, not to replay the message but to forward it to Samuel, along with 3 simple words. "We need to talk." Samuel called back almost instantly. "Henry, I just listened. I'm sending the audio transcript to the judge now." "So quickly," Henry whispered. "This is the clearest evidence we've had yet," Samuel said. "She confessed to intentional emotional harm, issued a financial threat, mocked your age, and violated the protective order by contacting you directly. A judge won't overlook this. Not anymore." Henry's throat tightened. "What happens now?" "She'll be summoned to court," Samuel replied. "And this time, Henry, there will be consequences." The hearing was set for the following week. The courthouse felt colder than Henry expected. Sterile walls, polished floors, distant echoes of footsteps. Mark stayed close beside him, a silent anchor. Nora sat behind them for support, her presence warm and steady. Henry tried to breathe evenly, but his chest felt wrapped in wire. When Lily entered the courtroom, escorted by an officer, not Dalton, another one, she looked different. Not wild. Not drunk. Just angry. A bitterness settled in her features like stone. She didn't glance at Henry. Didn't acknowledge Mark. Didn't seem to care who she hurt, who she lied about, or what came next. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, addressed the room calmly. We are here today to review clear violations of the existing protective order and allegations of threats, harassment, and attempted financial exploitation. Samuel stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Your Honor, the primary evidence has been submitted, an audio voicemail in which Ms. Collins admits to intentionally harming her father, threatening financial retaliation, and mocking his age in a targeted pattern of abuse. Lily rolled her eyes loudly enough for the courtroom to notice. The judge glanced at her, unimpressed. Ms. Collins, you will remain silent until addressed. Lily huffed but stayed quiet. Samuel continued. This recording, paired with the previous incidents documented by Officer Dalton and the fraudulent credit card application, presents a sustained pattern of coercive and dangerous behavior. The judge nodded once. I have reviewed the audio transcript in full. The evidence is substantial. Henry stared at a spot on the floor, unable to lift his gaze. Hearing his private pain laid out in legal language felt surreal and strangely clarifying. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a case, a pattern, a danger. Ms. Collins, the judge said finally, you have violated the protective order and issued threats. You are hereby found in contempt of court. Lily exploded. This is ridiculous. He's lying. They're all lying. Two officers stepped forward immediately. You can't arrest me, she screeched as they grabbed her arms. He's weak. He's pathetic. This is his fault. Age. Enri flinched at the words, but for the first time they didn't burrow under his skin. They stayed on the surface, ugly, hateful, but powerless. Officer Dalton appeared in the doorway at that moment, stepping in to assist. Lily twisted, trying to wrench free, but Dalton held her firmly. Stop fighting, Dalton warned. It's over. As Lily was escorted past Henry, her eyes finally landed on him, burning, furious, desperate. You'll regret this, she spat. Henry met her gaze quietly, without hatred, without fear, just sorrow. When she was pulled farther down the hallway, her voice echoing into the stairwell, he whispered, barely audible but full of finality. Goodbye, Lily. The words weren't a curse or a punishment. They were an ending. The closing of a door that had been splintering for years. As the officers led her away in handcuffs, Henry felt something inside him shift. Pain, yes, but also a strange liberation. The truth was finally undeniable. The court had seen it. The system had acknowledged it. The world understood what he had suffered. For the first time in a long time, Henry wasn't alone. And yet, as he stood there trembling, he also knew. The path ahead would not be simple. Not clean. Not painless. But at least now, the pretending was over. The night after the hearing, Henry slept. Not lightly, not restlessly, not with one ear tuned to every creak of the house, ready for Lily's footsteps, her pounding fists, or her rage clawing through the darkness. He slept deeply, fully, without fear. For the first time in months. When he woke, sunlight was drifting through the blinds in soft golden stripes. The house felt still, but not in a hollow way. It was calm. The silence wasn't a threat anymore. It was a balm. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands resting loosely in his lap, letting the quiet settle into the places where anxiety had lived for far too long. His breath rose and fell steadily, without the tightness that had become an unwelcome companion. For a few minutes, he let himself simply exist, without dread, without bracing for the next explosion. Just Henry. 2 days later, he sat in a softly lit office across from a therapist named Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and a voice that moved gently, like she understood how fragile grief becomes when it's ignored too long. Tell me what brought you here, she said. Henry looked down at his hands. They were older than he remembered, lined, worn, but steady. I don't know where to start." "Start where it hurts," she offered. He hesitated, then he told her everything. The birthday card, the threats, the smashed lamp, the lies to neighbors, the fraud attempt. The years before that, years he had pushed down into silence because fathers are supposed to endure, supposed to be strong, supposed to forgive endlessly. At one point his voice shook, at another it broke entirely, but he kept going. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting. When he finally fell quiet, exhausted and exposed, she spoke with gentle certainty. "Henry, what you experienced is emotional abuse. Prolonged, chronic, deep-rooted, and you survived it." He pressed a trembling hand to his chest. "It doesn't feel like survival." "That's because you're still healing," she said. "But you're here. You took the first step by choosing yourself." He nodded slowly. For the first time, he didn't feel ashamed of that. Mark became Henry's routine partner, arriving every morning at 9 sharp, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with breakfast sandwiches from the diner down the road. "All right, Dad," he'd say, clapping his hands together. "Walk first, breakfast second." Henry protested the first morning. "I don't walk in the cold." "You do now," Mark said with a grin. And he did. At first they only made it to the end of the street. The cold bit at Henry's cheeks, his joints ached, and the air stung his lungs. But each day he felt a little stronger, a little steadier, a little more capable of claiming his life back, one step at a time. Healthy meals followed, nothing fancy but real food. Not the microwaved dinners Henry had eaten out of loneliness and exhaustion. Mark cooked simple things: chicken, vegetables, warm soups, omelets. Sometimes he grilled on the back patio, smoke rising into the cold air like a signal of rebuilding. Henry regained color, strength, a sense of routine he hadn't realized he'd lost. Nora was there too, quiet but constant. She came by with homemade soup in mason jars, fresh bread still warm from her oven, and that steady presence that asked nothing of him but allowed him space to breathe. "This one's potato leek," she said one afternoon. "Good for the soul." Henry smiled. "You've been feeding my soul all winter, Nora." She smiled back without teasing, her eyes soft. "You needed nourishment, more than just food." She stayed for tea, for conversation, for the silence that no longer frightened him. Her presence filled the house with a gentleness Henry had forgotten existed. In the evenings, Henry opened the journal Samuel had encouraged him to keep. He wrote slowly, carefully, not to record Lily's cruelty anymore, but to trace the path of how he got here. He wrote about the fights from years ago. The first time she cursed at him. The nights she disappeared. The bank withdrawals he pretended not to see. The moments he convinced himself she was just struggling, not hurting him. The way he blamed himself for her pain, long after the truth was pointing elsewhere. As he wrote, a difficult but necessary realization formed. He hadn't lost Lily recently. He had lost her long ago. The birthday card wasn't the catalyst, it was the confirmation. The last puzzle piece in a picture he'd been too afraid to complete. Accepting that hurt. But it also freed him. One night, sitting alone at his kitchen table, Henry closed the journal and looked around the house, really looked. There were no broken items. No hateful voicemails waiting. No threats hanging in the air. No footsteps pounding on his door in the dark. The silence no longer suffocated him. It held him. He inhaled deeply, letting peace settle over him like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, he began to imagine a future not shaped by fear or guilt or constant anticipation of the next storm. A life where he could breathe, heal, live, maybe even hope. He wasn't fully there yet, not by a long shot. Healing wasn't linear, and grief didn't resolve just because the world grew quiet. But he could see the outline of a life. Beyond the pain, And that alone was enough to keep going. Henry never realized how much a house could hold, how much memory, how much grief, how much fear, until the morning he stood in his living room and decided it was time to reclaim it. The walls looked tired, yellowed by age and years of emotional heaviness. The furniture sat exactly where it had since his wife passed, as if the house had been frozen in time, preserved out of habit rather than love. Even the air felt stagnant. "This place deserves better," Nora had told him the night before, "and so do you." So he started with paint. Mark arrived with rollers, drop cloths, and a six-pack of energy drinks. "Dad, if we're doing this, we're doing it right," he said, tapping one of the cans. "Choose a color, nothing beige. Beige is for defeat." Henry laughed, a real laugh, something he hadn't felt in months. He chose a soft blue for the living room, something calm, something open. Mark nodded with approval. They moved furniture, taped edges, and set out trays. The first stroke of fresh paint felt like wiping years off the walls, years of shouting, fear, heartbreak. With every sweep, Henry felt something loosen inside him, something unwind from the tension that had wrapped around his ribs for so long. Midway through the project, they peeled down old photos from the wall, some of Lily, some of the family together, some of his wife smiling in the way that still warmed him. Henry paused at one picture, Lily at age 10, beaming after winning a school art contest. Innocent, proud, a different lifetime. He placed it gently in a box labeled Keep. But other pictures, ones that now felt tainted by what followed, he set aside. Not angrily, not out of spite, simply out of recognition that holding onto certain reminders was no longer healthy. "This doesn't erase her," Henry said quietly. Mark shook his head. "It honors you." By late afternoon, the room looked brighter. New paint, decluttered shelves, fresh frames waiting to be filled. Henry stood back and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Ownership. Belonging. Control. His home felt like his again. Not a battleground, not a place where fear lived in the walls. Over the next week, Henry continued the transformation. He replaced the worn-out rug in the hallway, added new curtains to the dining room, and bought a new lamp to replace the one Lily had smashed. He rearranged furniture to let more light in, swapped outdated decor for things that brought him peace, plants, art prints, a cozy throw blanket Nora insisted he take. Then came the hardest part, the closet in the master bedroom. It held boxes of his late wife's clothes, old wedding keepsakes, letters tied with ribbon. Henry had avoided it for years, partly grief, partly guilt, partly because it felt like disturbing a sacred space. But Mark stood beside him that morning, gentle but firm. "We'll take our time, Dad. You don't have to get rid of anything, just look through it. Talk to me about her." Henry opened the first box and lifted out one of her sweaters. The scent, faint lavender, time-softened, hit him hard. His throat tightened, but Mark was there, and with him the grief felt less like drowning and more like floating, painful, bittersweet, but survivable. They sorted for hours. Some items Henry kept, others he donated. Every piece sparked a memory: Christmas mornings, summer picnics, nights on the couch watching movies. Healing came in waves, some gentle, some sharp, but each wave washed something clean. When they finished, Henry felt lighter. Not because he'd erased her memory, because he'd honored it, because he'd acknowledged the love without letting the sorrow consume him. Nora visited often, bringing small gifts, fresh flowers, a new doormat, a tin of cookies shaped like leaves. But more than that, she brought encouragement. "You've been hiding for too long," she told him one afternoon as they drank tea on his newly arranged porch. "The community misses you. The world didn't stop because of Lily, and neither should you." Henry smiled faintly. "It's been a while since I've gone anywhere." "So start small," Nora said. "Come with me to the Wednesday community dinner. There's nothing to do but eat, talk, and enjoy being around people again." He hesitated. Socializing felt foreign, unfamiliar, but the thought of sitting alone in the house, now brighter, now warmer, suddenly felt lonelier than ever. "All right," he said, "I'll go." The dinner was simple, folding tables, crockpots, laughter echoing against the church hall. People greeted Henry warmly, some apologizing for believing Lily's lies. Others just patted his shoulder, glad to see him out again. He didn't feel judged. He didn't feel pitied. He felt seen. By the end of the night, he realized his shoulders weren't tense. His jaw wasn't clenched. He was smiling, gently, cautiously, but genuinely. He was re-entering society. Not as a broken man. Not as a victim. As Henry. Just Henry. When he returned home, he used in the doorway, taking in the soft blue walls, the tidy shelves, the framed photos. His wife smiling, Mark laughing, and soon he knew he'd add new photos, new memories. He inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with air that no longer tasted of dread. The house felt warm, safe, alive, a home that felt like his again. And for the first time in a very long time, Henry felt whole. Not healed, not fully, but whole enough to believe healing was possible. The call came on a quiet Monday morning just as Henry finished his second cup of coffee. The house, now repainted and warm, hummed with a gentleness he was still getting used to. When the phone buzzed, he expected Mark, or maybe Nora, checking in as she always did. Instead, the caller ID displayed County Social Services. Henry hesitated before answering. "This is Henry Collins." A calm voice responded. "Mr. Collins, my name is Dana Whitmore. I'm the social worker assigned to your daughter's case. I wanted to update you on a development." Henry straightened in his chair. For weeks, every update had been another shock, another crisis, another heartbreak. He braced himself. "Lily has entered counseling," Dana said. The words hung in the air, surprising him, not because he thought Lily incapable of getting help, but because he assumed she would fight it tooth and nail. Dana continued, explaining that the court mandated therapy as part of her compliance plan. "She's attending sessions," Dana said, "and she has completed the apology letter required by the judge." Henry exhaled slowly. "A letter?" "Yes, it's not meant to fix everything, it's a first step. It should arrive today or tomorrow." After the call ended, Henry sat at the kitchen table for several minutes, letting the information settle. Counseling, a letter, an apology he never asked for and wasn't sure he wanted. He didn't feel anger, not anymore. That emotion had burned itself out weeks ago, leaving behind something quieter, something distant. By mid-afternoon, the letter arrived. Plain envelope, typed name, court seal, official, not personal. Henry opened it carefully. "I apologize for my actions and words. I acknowledge the harm I caused. I will follow court requirements and focus on treatment." It wasn't tender, it wasn't emotional, but it wasn't manipulative either. It was honest in a bare minimum, structured way, like someone learning how to tell the truth without weaponizing it. Henry read it twice. Not with hope. Not with resentment. Just acceptance. Mark arrived later that evening and found Henry holding the letter, staring out the kitchen window. "Is that from Lily?" Mark asked. Henry handed it to him. Mark skimmed it and exhaled. "Dad, this doesn't erase anything, and it doesn't excuse what she did, but it shows the court's intervention is working." He paused, softening. "You protected yourself, and that was the hardest, bravest thing you've ever done." Henry nodded, feeling the truth of it but also the weight. "I don't hate her," Henry said quietly. "I just don't have anything left to give her." Mark squeezed his shoulder. "That's okay. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left." After Mark left, Nora came by with a small tin of chocolate cookies. She made a habit of stopping in after dinner, sensing when Henry needed company, and when he needed space. "I heard from Mark," she said gently. "The letter came." Henry nodded. "And?" she asked. Henry thought about it for a moment before answering. "It feels distant, like she's speaking from another world." Nora sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Distance is allowed, Henry. You deserve peace, not chaos, not fear, peace." Her words settled into him like warm stones on a cold night. Later in the evening, Henry sat with the letter again. Not to analyze it, not to question it, but to respond. He pulled a blank card from his desk drawer, simple, white, no decoration, and wrote a single line. "Heal but not here. No anger. No guilt. No invitation. Just a boundary. Clear. Steady. Necessary." He mailed it the next morning. As he placed the envelope into the slot, he felt something settle inside him. Finality, yes, but also closure. A quiet acknowledgement that their paths had diverged, and that letting go wasn't betrayal. It was survival. It was wisdom. It was peace reclaiming space where pain once lived. When he walked back toward his house, the home that felt like his again, he knew the truth. This chapter wasn't joyful, but it was complete. And whatever waited ahead, he was finally ready to meet it without fear. A full year had passed, 12 long months since the birthday that shattered Henry's world, and 12 slow, steady months of stitching himself back together. Early spring sunlight spilled across his kitchen table as he placed 3 plates, 3 forks, and a modest cake topped with a single candle. No big party, no noise, no chaos. Just peace. Mark arrived first, carrying 2 Surrey bags and humming something off-key. "I brought the good stuff," he said, unloading a loaf of fresh bread, a pot roast he'd made himself, and Henry's favorite apple crumble. "Dad, today you're not lifting a finger." Henry smiled. "I'm 69, not 90. Still, Mark grinned, birthday boy privileges. Nora arrived moments later with a bouquet of tulips, bright yellows and soft pinks that immediately warmed the room. She placed them on the table and leaned in to kiss Henry's cheek. "Happy birthday, Henry." He felt the kindness in the gesture settle somewhere deep inside, a place that had once been bruised and dark but was slowly, stubbornly healing. They ate together at the small dining table, the house filled with quiet conversation and clinking silverware instead of shouting, threats, or the heavy silence of tension. The food was warm, but the laughter was warmer. Henry found himself relaxing without effort. No need to anticipate an explosion. No need to hide his joy for fear it might be used against him. When they finished dinner, Mark wiped his hands on a napkin and reached into his jacket pocket. "I got you something." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You already cooked, that's plenty." "No, this is different." Mark handed him a simple gray envelope. Nothing fancy, no glitter, no embossed lettering. Just plain, honest, human. Henry opened it slowly. Inside was a card with 2 words. "You matter." The message hit him harder than he expected. His breath caught, and his hand trembled slightly. A year ago, he had opened a different card, one that called him human waste, one that told him to rot, one that carved wounds he didn't know were possible. This one healed something. He stared at the words until the edges blurred. Mark placed a gentle hand on his father's back. "Because you do, Dad, more than you know." Henry nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He swallowed against the tightness in his throat and whispered, "Thank you, son." Nora reached across the table and took Henry's hand, warm, steady, grounding. "You survived," she whispered. "You didn't just endure, you rebuilt." Henry felt a tear slip down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. It wasn't a tear of pain this time, or humiliation or fear. It was relief. Healing didn't rush. It didn't crash into him in one triumphant moment. It came slowly, quietly, through therapy sessions, through morning walks, through meals shared with people who cared, through evenings spent in a home that no longer felt haunted. Tonight the house glowed with soft yellow light, the smell of pot roast lingering in the air, the faint sound of Mark laughing at his own joke. This was safety. This was renewal. This was what life could be when chaos was no longer allowed to define it. After dessert, Mark stepped outside to take a phone call, leaving Henry and Nora alone for a moment. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the nearby fireplace. "You're different now," she said softly, "lighter, stronger." Henry chuckled, "Older too." "That too," she teased, squeezing his hand, "but mostly stronger." Henry glanced toward the mantel where Nora had placed the tulips. Beneath them sat a small wooden box, the one he had used to hide away the birthday card Lily sent a year ago. He stood, walked toward it, and lifted the lid. The card was still there, sharp-edged, poisonous, cold. He held it between two fingers and stared at it, not with anger, not with longing, but with clarity. "This doesn't own me anymore," he murmured. Nora rose and joined him by the fireplace. Henry opened the screen, felt the heat against his face, and dropped the hateful card onto the flames. It curled instantly, the ink warping, the words disappearing into ash. He watched until it was gone. When he turned back to Nora, she was smiling gently. "A good birthday gift to yourself." Henry exhaled deeply, a breath that felt like the final piece of something heavy being released. "Yes," he said, "the best one." As he walked back to the table where Mark waited with another joke, another slice of cake, and another year ahead, Henry realized something profound. Healing isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't fast. But it is real. And tonight, in a warm house filled with gentle voices and steady love, he finally felt whole again. The sky was still a muted gray when Henry stepped outside, the dawn just beginning to lift the darkness from the quiet cul-de-sac. The spring air held a gentle chill, cool enough to wake the senses, soft enough to feel like renewal. He inhaled slowly, letting the crispness settle in his lungs, letting it ground him in the present. This hour had become his favorite, before the world stirred, before responsibilities and memories and echoes of the past tried to pull him backward. Out here, in the quiet morning stillness, he felt something he once thought he'd lost forever. A future. He walked down the front steps, hands in the pockets of his light jacket, and paused at the edge of his yard. The grass sparkled with dew, each droplet catching the first hints of sunlight. He closed his eyes, letting the cool air brush against his face. A year ago, mornings had been the hardest, each day starting with dread, anxiety, the fear of what Lily might do or say next. Her voice had lived inside him, sharp and relentless, replaying every insult, every threat, every wound. But now silence. Not empty, not lonely. Peaceful. He reflected on the last year, the betrayal that had torn him open, the boundaries he had learned to build, the painful but necessary understanding that love couldn't fix what someone didn't want fixed. He thought of Lily, not with anger and not with longing, but with acceptance. His heart no longer twisted at the memory of her voice calling him worthless. His chest no longer tightened when he remembered her threats or accusations. Her words had lost their power. He had reclaimed it. The realization washed through him slowly, warmly. He was enough. Not because someone else validated it, not because he fixed a broken relationship, but because he had finally recognized his own worth after years of letting it be chipped away. He whispered into the cool morning air, "Lily's words don't live in me anymore." A soft crunch of gravel behind him made him turn. Nora approached, wrapped in a light sweater, her steps slow and gentle. "You're up early," she said, smiling as she joined him at the edge of the yard. "Couldn't sleep," Henry replied, "but in a good way." Nora looked out over the street with him, taking in the stillness. "It's beautiful this time of day," she said. "Quiet, clean, like the world is giving you a fresh page." Henry nodded, feeling the truth of that settle deep inside. For a long time, mornings felt heavy, he admitted. Now they feel possible. They stood together in silence, watching as sunlight finally broke over the rooftops, spreading gold across the horizon. Birds began their slow morning chatter, a soft soundtrack to a world beginning again. Nora glanced at him, warmth in her eyes. "You've come so far, Henry, I hope you know that." He did. For the first time, he truly did. "I used to think healing meant getting things back to how they were," Henry said. "But now I know it's about building something new and letting the old hurt go." Nora gently slipped her hand into his. He didn't flinch, didn't tense. He let himself exist in that moment, supported whole, steady. Henry looked out at the horizon again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not human waste." His throat tightened, but his voice didn't falter. "I'm human." The words didn't tremble. They didn't feel like defiance. They felt like truth. A truth he'd earned. A truth he'd built from ashes. Nora squeezed his hand but didn't speak. She didn't need to. Henry breathed in the spring air once more, new, clean, full of promise, and stepped forward, feeling the weight of the past finally loosen its grip. The path ahead wasn't perfect. It wasn't predictable, but it was his. He chose peace over pain, future over past, self-worth over survival. The sun warmed his face, bright and steady. "Her card tried to crush me," Henry whispered, a quiet strength threading through every word, "but it became the reason I rose again."